Hello and welcome to True Crime with Tori Lee. This is a bonus episode today, a special segment for requested cases from you, the viewers, called Dark Requests. Rachel Dunn requested today's case, which is the case of Katherine Mary Knight. I'm calling this the Abattoir worker who turned brutal murderer. I had this in my list of cases to cover because Katherine was actually the very first woman in Australia to receive life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for the disturbing crime she committed. Katherine stabbed her partner 37 times to death, skinned him, chopped him up, cooked him, and prepared to serve him to his own children. Thank you, Rachel, for this dark request. This case took place in a small town in New South Wales called Aberdeen. It's roughly a 3-hour drive north of Sydney and its population is under 2,000 people. This town is an industrial country town consisting of a total of 2 pubs. Katherine Mary Knight was born on the 24th of October in 1955 and was raised in a dysfunctional family environment. Katherine is one of twin daughters to Barbara and Ken Knight. Her father Ken was a violent alcoholic who would rape her mother Barbara up to 10 times per day. In turn, Barbara would often tell her daughters intimate details of their sex life and how much she hated sex and men. It is rumoured that Katherine was sexually assaulted by several members of her family, which continued until she was around age 11. Psychiatrists have accepted these claims, and these events have been largely confirmed by other members of the family. Katherine left school at the age of 15 without learning to read or write and gained employment as a cutter in a clothing factory. 12 months later, she left there and ended up securing to her, known as her dream job, working at the local abattoir in Boning, and was given her own set of butcher knives. At home, these knives hung over Katherine's bed. She stated that they would always be handy if she needed them. Katherine met a co-worker, David Kellett, in 1973. They dated and quickly became engaged and then later married in 1974. On their wedding night, Katherine strangled David and explained it was because he fell asleep after only having intercourse 3 times. The marriage was violent, and on one occasion, Katherine burned all of David's clothing and shoes before hitting him in the back of the head with a fry pan. Simply because he arrived home late from a darts competition after reaching the finals in fear for his life, David fled and collapsed in a neighbour's house. And he was treated for a severely fractured skull. In May 1976, shortly after the birth of their first child, Melissa, David left Katherine for another woman and fled to Queensland, unable to cope with the abuse any longer. The next day, Knight was seen pushing her new baby in a pram down the main street, violently throwing the pram from side to side. Katherine was admitted to St. Elmo's Hospital in Tamworth, where she was diagnosed with postnatal depression and spent several weeks recovering. After she was released, Katherine placed her 2-month-old baby Melissa on a railway line, shortly before the train was due. Katherine then stole an axe, went into town, and threatened to kill several people. An unsheltered man, known in town as Old Ted, found and rescued baby Melissa, only minutes before the train was due. Katherine was arrested and again taken to St. Elmo's Hospital, but she signed herself out the next day. A few days later, Katherine slashed the face of a woman with one of her knives and demanded she drive her to Queensland to find David. The woman escaped after they stopped at a service station, but by the time the police arrived, Katherine had taken a young boy hostage and was threatening him with a knife. Katherine was then admitted to the psychiatric hospital. Katherine told the nurses she had intended to kill the mechanic at the service station because he had repaired David's car, which had allowed him to leave, and then kill both her husband and his mother when she arrived in Queensland. When the police informed David of the incident, he left his girlfriend and moved back to Aberdeen with his mother to support Katherine. Katherine was released on the 9th of August 1976 into the care of her mother-in-law, and along with David moved to Ipswich, west of Brisbane in Queensland. Katherine obtained a job at Dinmore Meatworks. On the 6th of March 1980, Katherine and David had their second child, Natasha. In 1984, Katherine left David and moved back to Aberdeen. She returned to work at the Abattoir. However, the following year she injured her back and went on a disability pension. The government gave her a housing commission home. In 1986, Katherine met a man who worked in the mines named David Saunders. Katherine soon becomes jealous about what he did when she isn't around and would often throw him out of the home and then later go to his apartment and beg him to return. In 1987, Katherine cut the throat of David's 2-month-old dingo pup in front of him for no reason, other than an example of what would happen if he ever had an affair, before going on to knock him out with a frying pan. In 1988, Katherine and David Saunders gave birth to a daughter named Sarah. This prompted David to put a deposit down on a house, and Katherine paid off the deposit when her workers' compensation came through. In 1989, Katherine decorated the house with animal skins, skulls, horns, rusty animal traps, machetes, and pitchforks. There was no space. She had an argument with David Saunders and hit him in the face with an iron before she stabbed him in the abdomen with a pair of scissors. He fled for a few days, and when he returned, David found she had cut up all his clothes. David took long service leave and went into hiding. Katherine tried to find him, but no one admitted to knowing his whereabouts. David returned to see his daughter and found that Katherine had gone to the police and told them that she was afraid of David and issued him with a domestic violence order. In 1991, Katherine became pregnant with a co-worker, John Chillingworth. They gave birth to a baby boy and called him Eric. Katherine and John's relationship lasted 3 years before she left him for a man she had been having an affair with for some time, John Price. Okay. So let's just do a quick recap. She had 2 daughters with David Kellett, left him and went and had a 3rd daughter with David Saunders. She then has a son with John Chillingworth and left him after having an affair with John Price. Now, you are not crazy. Yes, there are 4 men involved. However, 2 share the same name, David, and 2 share the same name, John. Now, all this violence, chaos, and craziness, and we have only just gotten to the victim now. John Charles Thomas Price. The beginning of Katherine and John's relationship was without complications. He had 2 older children who lived with him, and they seemed to like Katherine, and he made enough money to keep her comfortable. They moved in together in 1995, and things were going smoothly. Katherine suggested they marry, and John declined. She turned violent. Katherine framed John for stealing things from his company and got him fired. John kicked Katherine out, but a few months later, they started seeing each other again. However, he refused to let her move back in. According to family and friends, this is when Katherine's violence began to escalate. Cracks started to appear. She was quite jealous, quite violent, physically and mentally. If John had been at the pub too long, she was violent. John was visibly rattled and concerned for his safety. In February 2000, an argument between John and Katherine occurred, and it ended up with Katherine attempting to stab John in the chest. He took out a restraining order on her in an attempt to keep his children safe. But John was still extremely concerned for his welfare and even told his co-workers that if he ever went missing, it was because Katherine had killed him. And he was right to be afraid. Katherine actually accused John of being the violent one. Katherine didn't live there, but she still had rights, and John was told he needed to issue her with a notice to leave, which they went to court and fought about, so John felt trapped. He couldn't get her out of the house, and she just wouldn't go, despite police attending on several occasions. On the 29th of February 2000, John came home from work and followed his usual routine, checking in with the neighbours before heading to bed around 11 p.m. Katherine walked in shortly after. She made herself dinner, watched TV, showered, and then went upstairs. She woke John up, the pair had sex, and he went back to bed. The following morning, John hadn't arrived at work. John was a hard-working, reliable man. His work colleagues started to become concerned that he hadn't arrived for his shift and wanted to check in on him. His neighbour noticed John's car was still in the driveway and became concerned. The co-workers began driving to the house. Both the co-worker and the neighbour tried knocking on John's window to wake him. They decided to alert the police when they noticed blood on the front door and notified them of the situation. The fear and safety concerns John had, the violence he was experiencing, and not showing up for work or contacting anyone when he was extremely reliable. The police and co-workers broke in through the back door and came in through the laundry. There was a lingering smell as they entered the property. They had been met with Katherine's gruesome crime scene. There were splashes of blood that had been coughed up all over the wall. There was a pool of blood roughly measuring 1.2 meters wide. There was genitals found in one room. In another room, there was limbs found. As police continued to investigate and walked into the kitchen, they realized John's head was found in a pot on the stove, boiling with vegetables and 2 plates at the dinner table, along with notes beside each plate, each having the names of John's children on it. Neither meal had been touched. She was preparing to serve John's body parts to his children. A third meal was found in the lawn in the backyard, and it is suggested that Katherine had attempted to eat it but could not. The kettle had a blood stain on it. There was a handprint on the knife. Police continued to search the house and heard somebody snoring in a room nearby. When they enter the room, they find Katherine was lying down next to the headless corpse of John. Katherine was very hard to wake up and was instantly detained. Katherine took a large number of pills and passed out. Once Katherine woke up, she claims to have no recollection of the night. In a lengthy interview with Katherine, she still states she is not guilty and that she doesn't remember anything. However, detectives presented a scenario and Katherine is their only suspect. They suspect that she was the perpetrator and she wasn't a victim at all, and blame John for the violence. Each previous lover of Katherine's revealed similar behaviour patterns. Detectives believe after John went back to sleep, Katherine grabbed the knife from her bedside table and stabbed John with a butcher knife while he slept. According to the blood evidence, he woke up and tried to turn on the light before attempting to escape, while Katherine chased him through the house. John managed to open the front door and get outside, but he either stumbled back inside or was dragged back in by Katherine into the hallway, where he finally died by bleeding out. Police believe Katherine later then stole John's wallet and withdrew $1,000 from his bank account at an ATM and took her car back to her house. Several hours after John had died, Katherine skinned him and hung the skin from a meat hook on the door to the lounge room. She then decapitated John and cooked parts of his body, serving up the meat with baked potatoes, carrot, zucchini, beetroot, cabbage, and gravy. Katherine refuses to take responsibility for her actions. Katherine's initial plea to manslaughter was rejected and she was charged on the 2nd of March 2001 for murdering John Price. When Timothy took the stand and described the skinning and decapitation, Katherine became hysterical and had to be sedated. She pleaded not guilty. However, the day trial was to begin. Katherine changed her plea to guilty. Despite giving this guilty plea, Katherine still refused to accept the responsibility for her actions. On November 8th, Justin O'Keefe pointed out that the nature of the crime and Katherine's lack of remorse required a severe penalty. He sentenced her to life in prison with no parole and marked her paperwork as never to be released. For the first time in history, a woman in Australia was given a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The psychiatrist's analysis concluded that Katherine had borderline personality disorder. Katherine appealed her sentence and was denied instantly. She is still serving time now at Silverwater Women's Correctional Centre. That is all I have time for today. A new episode is released weekly. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed yourself and want more content, then hit that subscribe button, leave a review, or share with your other true crime besties. Or comment below for a dark request and what you would like me to cover. Stay safe and be vigilant. Bye.